Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. Hey, Thriving Farmers, Michael Kilpatrick here with yet another episode of the Thriving Farmer Podcast. Today, my guest is John Bell, a managing owner of Elmwood Stock Farm in Georgetown, Kentucky. As a sixth-generation farmer, John Bell, along with his wife Melissa, oversees organic crop production, pastured livestock, and a grass-fed beef herd, all while raising the farm's seventh generation. John, welcome to the podcast.
Great, Michael. Thanks for having me, and appreciate the interest.
Absolutely. So, John, give us a little bit of background. You said you're a sixth generation farmer. Talk about when was the farm established?
So we've been on this farm where I grew up for just 60, 70 years, but we've been in the central Kentucky area, several counties to the east, migrating towards Lexington each generation. It seems like I'm the sixth generation of farmers. So,
okay.
The other half of the family was some dairy farmers south of Lexington, but kind of coalesced in the bluegrass area.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about your region. You're in Georgetown. What's the climate like? What's your rainfall?
Okay, so rainfall is a little over 40 inches a year. October is the driest month of the year. Frost-free date is historically anyway been May 10th. And start getting nervous about frost in mid-October. We are physically located about 30 minutes from Lexington, Kentucky, an hour from Louisville, an hour from Cincinnati. So we're on the northern edge of the bluegrass region. Like our county, the southern half of the county is beautiful rolling horse farms and limestone karst soil, Maury silt loam, and then the northern part of the county is pretty rough. You can reach out in front of you and touch it, kind of getting a lot of cedar, a lot of clay and shale. So,
all right. And then the farm you're on, how many acres is the total farm?
So we're 380 acres. Roughly half of that is, it's rolling land. So half of that is tillable to some degree, and other half is permanent pasture.
Okay. All right. So then talk a little bit about for that time you've been on your farm right there. I'm assuming, was it your parents that bought it, your grandparents?
Yes, grandparents bought it. Then I was born and raised here. My sister and I, here on the farm, there's two of us. And so we're in the central Kentucky area, so horse farms, the bourbon industry that most people are familiar with. But then the historical crop for this area for the last 100 years has been burley tobacco. So one of the three ingredients for a regular, Western blend cigarette. So we're in the middle of burley country. I grew up on a cattle and tobacco farm. It was very typical for this area. If you weren't a horse farm, you were probably a cattle and tobacco farm. Because again, a lot of the land you can't till, and even what you can till, it might be in 5 or 8 acre blocks down to an acre or two valley type of thing. So, our biggest field, continuous field, is probably 10 or 12 acres, but a lot of 5 and 8 acre blocks. One field might have 4 or 5 of those in it, but there's a wash in the middle that we can't till, that kind of thing. So anyway, that lends itself to a high value, low acreage crop, and then we have a pretty humid environment here in the summer, and then a humid but dry fall, and that tended to cure a good tobacco leaf. And so environmentally, this became to burley tobacco country because it would had good soils to grow a big leafy crop. They high phosphorus soils, makes good pasture, but also help the tobacco. And then our humid fall, so you'd harvest the tobacco in the barn, let it hang, it would air dry, unlike in the Carolinas where it's cooked dried. This is air dried, and that humid days and cool nights allowed it to basically come in and out of case, which means it would be crispy one day and like a dish rag the next, and that allowed it to cure rather than dry out. And so that's why this became tobacco area.
So what's the difference between curing and drying?
I would assume the curing process is slower, and it probably makes the leaf have a if you I'm no scientist. I don't know this for sure, but the curing process would set the color rather than just, it would have a golden color in the leaf, but it would be a red, brown, khaki, tan, depending on which part of the plant the leaf came out of. There was preferably, different textures and different colored leaves were preferred by the tobacco companies. And so I assumed that the curing rather than the drying kind of allowed a true deeper color, but also flavor, I would imagine, because ultimately they are looking for whatever flavor that's needed in a cigarette. They were looking for certain characteristics that came out of a leaf that slowly cured over time rather than. So the flip side, flue cured tobacco in the Carolinas, which I know very little about, but that's cured or dried out with heat. And so basically it goes from a green leaf, wilts a little bit, then they apply heat for maybe 48 hours and cook it dry. And so that's doing the opposite. That's like setting a certain color. And a lot of those leaves are like bright yellow and orange. Ours are more oaks and tans and a reddish leather color, I guess you could say. And so
interesting.
Yeah, I assume it affected the flavor and texture.
Yeah. Fascinating.
So anyway, so we grew up on the cattle and tobacco farm. And so, the tobacco was a high value crop since we didn't have a lot of tillable acres. The environment allowed it to work well here. So tobacco thrived here for 100 years or so. Obviously, when I was in college, we were still heavy in tobacco, but it was, cigarettes were selling like crazy. It was still, pre vaping and everybody worried, making the realization, but the handwriting was on the wall that there wasn't, I shouldn't have staked my future on tobacco because, the health consequences were out there, whether people were admitting it or not. And I certainly, as a young fellow, didn't want to stake my future. My sister was the same way, this one farm family, 2 kids go off to school and they came back from school, the same farm trying to support that family. It was now 3 families, college graduate and young families getting started. How are we going to make this allow this farm to help support all of us? And then we had the foresight, I guess, to not invest, double down on tobacco and cattle. And so we started diversifying into other high value crops that you can grow on a small footprint. And then it also kind of went along with our moral bearings, whatever, to not sell. We didn't really want to sell or work in commodities. We wanted to support and fit in and nourish our local community. So we started down replacing high value tobacco with high value produce, so tomatoes and peppers and pumpkins and that kind of stuff. It's our segue into produce.
Yeah. Okay. So then you also have a large side of the farm, which is cattle and all. Talk a little bit about adding in the animals.
Yeah. So back to the system we grew up with was cattle and tobacco. We've replaced the tobacco with produce, other high value crops, but high nutrient demanding crops, and also labor intensive crops. And the cattle remained as part of that program. And so it was an economic, not having all of our eggs in just the tobacco basket, but also the topography allowed for grazing or wanted to be grazed. So we had cattle, and then when I was a kid, we actually had sheep. So sheep were a big program in Kentucky years ago, generations ago. There was a lot of sheep in Kentucky as well as cattle, and they thrive. They do really well. We got really good pastures, natural bluegrass, but orchard grass, and clover pastures that do pretty well. So ruminant livestock seem to do well in Kentucky as a whole. And so, for a tobacco farmer, the rest of the land that couldn't be cash cropped was grazed with livestock. But also my grandfather taught my father, who taught us that part of what made that synergy work wasn't just the economic diversity, but it was the rotation of the crops and the livestock on the farm. So whether it was tobacco ground, and then for us, produce or vegetable ground, we plow sod and crop it for a couple of years and then you put it back into pasture and let the cattle graze it. And that allowed for a very fertile soil. You know, tobacco is a high yielding, you're hauling a lot of tons off the land, unlike produce. You know, we can talk
Yeah.
about that in a minute, but tobacco is a very high yielding. You're trying to haul as much tons as you can off the field. And so fertility, you know, you're hauling a lot of fertility off the farm. So to replace it requires inputs. But the more that we were able to build the fertility back with the livestock in the rest period, cattle manure. So you have a permanent pasture there for 3, 4, 5 years, cattle grazing it. They are, other than a few pounds of weight that they gain that week they're out there grazing, you know, they walk a few pounds of weight gain off of there. The rest of all that forage has just been basically composted and turned back into the soil. The grass grows again, the cattle graze it, gain a couple pounds of weight. The rest of all that biomass is dumped right back there on the soil, and the manure and the urine are trampling. And so it's kind of like, this is the reason why mob grazing now is popular or works to build soil. Well, we actually do implement some mob grazing now, but it's the reason why mob grazing works is, I mean, the sun and the plants are doing all the energy capturing, but then instead of harvesting it and hauling it off, the cattle are actually turning it back into more energy, more nutrients, and cramming it into the soil. And so, you know, we learned every year you plow sod and plant a tobacco crop, that first crop was always better than your second crop. So you're going to go in there and do a really destructive activity, such as mow, bore, plow a field. Well, we would crop it with tobacco for a couple of years. And that was kind of the normal rotation for my father. You know, that generation around here was plow, sod, crop it for tobacco for a couple of years, and sow it back down and rest it for 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah.
But that's evolved to what we do now is we break ground, because again, I feel like I do all these years of building up the nutrients and the biology and the energy and the organic matter in the soil, then I turn around and destroy it with some major tillage event. I want to get my money's worth. And so we right now our rotation is we crop it for 3 years, and then we rest it in pasture for 5. So our rotation went from 2 to 4, 3 to 5, but it's basically the same principle. And the livestock, the sheep and the cattle, they are both an economic tool, but a machine that makes that soil rebuilding work. So, you know, I have tomatoes out there and making quite a few $1,000s an acre in sales of tomatoes, a high value cash crop, but it's mining, you know, some nutrients out of the soil. When I'm resting that soil and rebuilding it while it's in permanent pasture, or you could call it cover crops, you know, while I'm cover cropping that field for a few years, not just one or not just winter time, the cattle are still making me a few $100s an acre by selling them, whether I'm selling bulls or heifers, or now what we sell is steaks and, you know, ground beef and sausages and stuff. But those cattle are still paying me to rest and rebuild that soil as part of that rotation.
So talk a little bit about the transition from the pasture to the vegetables. Are you just doing a plow down, disc, and then what's the crop that you like to start out with in that rotation?
Okay, so the process, you know, originally was a mobile plow and a disc harrow. That's what everybody did around here. Now, obviously, a lot of commodity farmers or larger farmers are practicing no-till around here, which is great to see. But we're certified organic, so we still do have to do some tillage you have a sod of alfalfa and clover and perennial grasses. It's pretty difficult to just, you know, you can't just take it back into a tilled environment without something destructive. But I'd say in the last 5 or 6 years, we've replaced the plow and the disc with a shallow rototiller. So we basically overgraze it. I look at the overgrazing as my burn down herbicide, so to speak.
Okay.
And then do a shallow rototiller 2 or 3 inches deep to actually kill the crown of the perennial grasses. That's the hardest thing to kill is fescue or orchard grass or bluegrass. And so that's, again, I'm kind of using the tiller as a mechanical burn down, if you want to say. And then that by grazing it down, and this is springtime, so I'm grazing cattle through the winter, feeding hay, but also grazing cattle. So in terms of overgrazing or having the forages eaten down to a very short state, that's not a problem anyway. But in February, March, April, then we do a primary tillage, and sometimes one's enough. Then you can go a second tillage and plant. Sometimes it takes a couple of passes, and then you're bed prep and planting on the third tillage. But that's basically the process. And then, so of our cropland, we do about 40 acres, 35 to 40 acres in vegetables every year. And we kind of have 3 cropping systems. We have half of that, or a little bit better, would be in traditional row crops planted with either direct seeded, air seeder, or riding a transplanter and planting it in bare ground that we cultivate with a cultivator.
Okay.
We put about 10 or 12 acres of black plastic and white plastic mulch down every year. And that's where we plant the higher value season long crops. So that's often what's going into that first year of, we've built up all the nutrients. We have this big energy reserve just waiting to grow some crops, push some stuff out of the ground. And so that's where we want to put our high value stuff. So the first year ground is tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, squash, zucchini. Sometimes we'll put our potatoes there, and then some herbs and some flowers. So the higher value cutting coming in, or picking fruit off, reharvesting over and over again. That's what we put on the plastic crops, the plastic mulch, drip irrigation, and that's often what goes on that first year ground that has all the fertility in it.
Okay.
Second year ground. So in the fall, we'll take up the plastic. We usually harvest up until stuff's dead from frost. So sometimes it's hard to get a good cover crop stand, but we'll take the plastic up and try to get the cover crop out for the winter. Then it's springtime. We'll sow early spring transplants. So cabbage, broccoli, peas. Let's see, a lot of times that's the field that sweet potatoes will go into.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of what's
Okay.
out there right now. Overwintering garlic, overwintering spinach is there.
Yep.
And then the third year ground is often the legumes. So that's maybe where the beans and the peas would be. And then sometimes that's where sweet potatoes, for us, the sweet potatoes seem to do pretty well on tired soil. And so after we cropped it for 2 hard years, that third year, it's kind of run out of gas. So that's where we put the legumes, or that's where if we do some side dressing, that's where we'll do the side dressing on that third year ground. But that's also where the sweet potatoes often go, is the third year ground. And so it's a philosophy and an approach. And then at times the sweet potato slips come in, you didn't have your ground quite ready. And so it doesn't always end up being put where the plan was, but that's the audible you call at the time. But the approach is high value the first year, spring and fall transplants the second year, legumes and sweet potatoes or lower nutrient demanding crops the third year. Then that third year we sow it back down. We'll use a cover crop of used to be barley was a big crop around here because it would make a good livestock feed. But we use a lot of rye now because we can use it as a livestock feed, but also we use a whole lot of rye as cover crop. And so we'll combine a little bit of the rye and save our own seed some years. But anyway, that into that third year, we'll do a pretty heavy cover crop. And then we'll sow it back into legumes and perennial grass pastures and put it back into cattle pasture for 5 years.
Okay. All right. That's a great overview of that. Now, with the sweet potatoes in particular, what varieties do you like to grow?
Orleans and is standby, and then Versaki is a Japanese variety or Oriental variety.
Yes.
Red skin, white flesh. Those are the go-to, and then there's last year we had a third one. I can't remember the name right now, but the Orleans is by far the traditional that does well for us. The traditional looking sweet potato.
Now, do you feel like your soil is a little bit on the heavier side, or?
Yeah, it's so sweet potatoes, carrots, all those root crops. We're not perfect for it. the fertility is good, but yeah, it's we get some deformed fruit and stuff, roots, I should say.
Yeah.
Because it's digging it can be a chore, they don't just fall out of the ground perfectly clean with no dirt clinging to it and everything. So
Yeah.
our soil is
Yeah.
a little bit, it's not ideal for root crop.
Yeah. Back in New York, we had about a 1.5 acre section that was literally that fall out of the ground, and we had beautiful sweet potatoes anytime we could get them up there.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's just not, I mean, there is some soil in Ohio that's like that, but where you are, where I am right now, that's just, we don't have that type of soil.
Yeah.
So,
To be honest, the sweet potatoes do pretty well. The potatoes and carrots, I have to grow the more wedge shaped carrots,
yes,
not long and
yes,
skinny, something that
yes.
can kind of fight for itself or push itself out of the ground some. The soils are a little bit tight or a little bit dense for those. And then the potatoes do pretty well, but sweet potatoes seem to really want to do better than the potatoes. We do a lot of Irish potatoes, but it's a little more of a chore.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, interesting. So then let's talk, you talked about the production side of the farm. All right, so where is all this food going?
Okay, so majority of it's going within an hour of our farm, like 99% of we ship some meat around the country, but
Okay.
everything else goes within basically an hour drive. We do 4 farmers markets, and we do we do summer, fall, and winter CSA. So if you wanted to sign up for all 3, it's basically year round. Summertime is obviously the biggest one. It's about 750 or so shares. And the majority of that is Lexington. That's we go to 2 farmers markets, and the biggest bunch of our CSA go to Lexington drop-off locations. But we do go to Louisville, and we also go to Cincinnati, farmers market, Cincinnati, and CSA in Cincinnati.
Okay, so you are up in the Cincinnati area.
Yeah.
So then so you have the vegetables, you have the meat. What other, do you guys do any value adding, anything processed?
Yeah. So, like the meats, we take it to our butcher is south of here, a couple hour drive, and it's only butcher in Kentucky that has a certified organic, keeps their certified organic status up. So our meat can remain labeled certified organic. So the butcher's south of us, but then we'll take some stuff to another butcher or processor in Cincinnati that turns it into several different sausages, summer sausages, sausage links. And so we do some value adding of the meats that way. Both meat, beef. So we have beef, pork, lamb, turkeys, and poultry. And so we have like turkey sausage as well, and several different lamb sausages, pork sausages, and beef sausages. Then we do a little bit of value adding in salsas and ketchups, barbecue sauce, a few herb packages, dried herbs, that type of stuff. But the majority of our produce is sold as fresh produce. Some of it's preserved. We dipped our toe into freezing a few years ago, but that didn't, efficiency wise, we never got to be super efficient at that. So that's when we put up high tunnels and just try to grow stuff year round rather than freezing and preserving.
Yes.
We sell a little bit of buy and resell. So we sell like coffee and some fish from Alaska occasionally, some fruits, some organic. It's hard to find organic peaches and pears in Kentucky, so we bring in some organic peaches and pears from an organic farmer that's a friend of ours in Colorado. So we do a few resale items, and then there's a few. I've quit trying to grow melons. I'm not a very good melon grower. So there's a few produce items that we buy and resell, but the majority of what we sell is still what's grown on the farm.
So then you said you're bringing in, is it some fruit from Colorado?
Yes, some apples, peaches, and pears, but primarily peaches and pears are the big draw.
Yeah.
Because it's just hard to find. Or I just got through saying that 99% of what we grow and sell is within an hour drive of the farm. So we're very community based or very community focused. But we're also still very organic focused. And so it's important to us to try to source organic items, and we struggle to find organic peaches ourselves just for our own consumption. And so we bring a truck or two every fall, or every late summer. We'll bring in some organic peaches from pretty far away. It's kind of a splurge on our part, I guess you could say.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. We were trying to bring in organic peaches, and we were working with someone in, I believe it was North Carolina.
Mhm.
And like they told me, well, wait to the next variety because the next variety is better. Because we had it this year, that last year was the year we were going to get them. And then they had a hailstorm.
Oh, wow.
So I was like so disappointed. We had pre-orders and everything. And so people were just so disappointed. But yeah, I may have to, if those folks out west have more capacity, I might have to hook you up with you for those people as
Absolutely.
well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get more pallets on the truck.
Exactly.
Yeah. So are you bringing that in refrigerated then?
Yes, of course.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
got to be very expensive
It
then.
is. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the freight is probably half the cost, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's connect on that later then.
Okay.
All right. So then you're doing some farmers markets, some CSA, some wholesale too, because I believe you sell to what chefs want.
Yes, some. For
Okay.
us, the wholesale is more like there's a Good Foods Co-op is a
Yes.
co-op grocery in downtown Lexington, Rainbow Blossom of Louisville. So there's some smaller groceries that we do direct store delivery to. We do several restaurants in the Lexington and Louisville and
Mhm.
Cincinnati area. Years ago, I did a whole lot of wholesale, but as we transition from tobacco commodity farming to food farming, basically, and then we transitioned as well into organic food farming. We've also evolved to more and more retail and less wholesale, and it's philosophical, but it kind of helps make our farming back to that rotation I was talking about. We're basically a very low input farm. So part of the reason for maintaining or working on that livestock crop rotation is it helps us to farm in a low impact way. So we're not a no input farm by any stretch, but we're definitely lower than the average in terms of off farm
Mhm.
inputs. And a big chunk of that is allowing our fields to rest and rebuild and capture energy and nitrogen from the air, getting free energy and fertility through that rest period. But the other part is, by selling higher value and or added value and or food crops locally versus tons of bulky items off the farm, we have
Correct.
less nutrients to replace to begin with. And so
Mm.
so it goes back to our farming philosophy. If you talk about that more if you wanted, but it's that. So the retail aspect is a big chunk of that. So we're selling pork chops rather than organic corn. I want to look at it that way, or we're selling
Yes.
a ribeye instead of hay, or we're selling eggs instead of corn, rye or wheat again. So
Yeah. So you're trying to concentrate what's leaving the farm
yes.
because I believe remind me, how far are you from Lexington again?
So we're about 20 minutes, 30
Oh,
miles.
okay.
Well,
So
20
not
miles,
that
30
bad.
minutes from Lexington. So
Yeah.
yeah, Lexington's just down the road. It's really convenient. And that's
Yeah.
by far our biggest market. But then Cincinnati and Louisville are bigger cities. And so we go there as well. But those are both an hour away. And that's
Yeah.
the extent of our radius. I mean, no joke.
Yeah.
South Cincinnati and East Louisville is about as far away from home as we get.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I'm assuming you're just in like a township or rural.
Yeah. So we are on the edge of Georgetown.
Okay.
And that's because the town's coming out to us. As a kid,
Yes.
get anybody to even come out to the farm and pick me up to give me a ride to town. And now, we're basically the buffer for Georgetown. We're
Yeah.
fortunate. I'm not complaining. We have, markets right nearby, yet we're still living on a farm. And so I recognize how fortunate we are. That lends itself to us doing all this retail sales. And so we're trying to capitalize on that and be a good steward of the land and of our community.
Yeah.
The retail aspect is a big part of that.
So where do you see the farm going in the next couple of years?
Well, so we aren't necessarily growing for the sake of growth. You know, we are happy when there's demand for our product. We want to try, we never want to turn a customer away. So we've grown over the years, but it's kind of been by demand, I guess. We've been fortunate to have people wanting to buy our stuff. We aren't, land is probably not our limiting factor yet. Labor is still by far our biggest single expense, and it's our biggest limiting factor. Or the area we have to, we're doing so much, we're so diverse that, we have tractors, we're mechanized, but with that said, we're not very efficient or very good at any one thing. And so, there's always room for improvement on harvesting, growing and harvesting on the labor side of it. But we can continue to sell more, grow a little bit more. We're not maximized on land yet. So the future is to continue to try to satisfy the local customers that are wanting local and organic fresh stuff. And we're doing more and more year round, which is, it's kind of a quandary for us because we hate to turn a customer away that wants local and fresh, but also it's not, you're kind of pushing a stone uphill to try to be growing, having lettuce in January and February. And so we have high tunnels and, but nothing grows, it just sits there. You plant it in October and November, and it's basically just an outdoor refrigerator for a couple of months while the days are so short.
Correct.
And so it's kind of, on the one hand, we want to supply our customers who are looking out for the stuff that we have. But the other side is Kentucky's not really meant to grow stuff year round. And so we don't want to expend ridiculous resources on trying to have stuff year round. And so, our summer CSA is 750, 800 people, and our winter CSA is a couple hundred people. We'd love to be able to do all of that year round, but it's impractical. It seems like it's a little bit environmentally unfriendly to try to grow for 750 people in January, so it's a fine line between satisfying customers, seizing an opportunity for growth, but also doing things that really aren't wanting to be done in this area, in this environment, that are difficult time of year. But yeah, so we continue to grow. We continue to do a little bit of wholesale, but the wholesale hopefully is it's just again, local distributions, local restaurants, local small stores, or what chefs want for sure. So we've sold with them on and off over the years, and it's more of the smaller items or the specialty items. We don't do a whole lot of bulk. Years ago, we did semi-loads of tomatoes, but that's been a long time ago.
Okay, so back to this whole winter aspect of it, because that's an interesting point. And then I want to tie into too, as well as because of where you're located, do you feel like there is any resistance to you being organic and people not being willing to pay the prices? It does sound like you seem to be doing just fine.
So I think, there's every year there's more people interested in organic food for sure. Our peers, our community of organic farmers in central Kentucky or in Kentucky is significantly larger than it was 10 or 20 years ago. And so there's definitely room for more of us for sure. But with that said, it's still a fledgling industry. I feel like there's not a lot of organic wholesale in Kentucky, and so that's that's part of the difficulty in just expanding one crop in a wholesale manner. There's not a lot of demand on a wholesale level, but there is a fair demand on a retail. So the flip side is when I quit growing melons. So when you go to find, there's not just a farm down the road that you can just go pick up some organic melons on. There's a lot of melon farms, but there's not the organic melon. So it's not just we were looking for some organic sweet corn, and I was doing an early season crop, but we were looking for somebody to do a later season crop. And it took a while and quite a few miles before we found somebody to do an organic sweet corn crop. So with that said, it is still a fledgling industry in the grand scheme of things. Every year there's more demand from the customers. A lot of our long-term loyal customers are either we get a lot of customers when they're new moms. That's the first time you start worrying about what you're eating or worried about what you're feeding your family. Like, I was the same way. I ate everything in the world, didn't think twice about it when I was in college. But then, when you start having your own kids or feeding your own kids, you think about what you're putting in their mouth. And so we have a lot of older people with health issues or young new moms, new families. So that's the genesis of a lot of our customers. And then, so we feel like the organic helps us to maybe stand out or get a customer, but then we try to keep them by the quality. So we, organic or not, we just try to present everything's washed, everything's refrigerated, everything. We try to present and sell and distribute stuff that still has a ton of shelf life under it and highest of quality. So that gets back to some of our labor and back to some of our inefficiencies. We're growing 50 different crops and 5 different species. We're not the diversity is awesome for like the feng shui of the farm, the ecosystem on the farm, and it's awesome for our customers, one-stop shop, they can buy so much stuff. But the flip side is we're not very efficient at any of it because it's so diverse, you can't really specialize in anything. And then on top of that, we're trying to do, we wash everything. We don't sell anything dirty. And just because it's we want to have the high quality and high long shelf life, but that cuts into our efficiency. And so it's the economics is probably what we struggle at the most. Everything else is the farming system and the philosophy and quality of the produce and the quality of the land and the livestock and the people that work here are all top notch. But it comes at a cost. We're still trying to have our cake and eat it too. So still working in that direction.
Because cleaning crop does take time, effort, equipment. What equipment do you have for that, especially because you have heavier soils?
Yes. So a lot of our harvesting is by hand. We have an old gigantic potato digger that takes 2 days working on it to get it out to dig for a half a day. So we have a few harvest aids, but a whole lot of our stuff, almost everything is harvested by hand. And so that allows for some culling in the field while you're doing it. So whether it's leafy greens or tomatoes or peppers or potatoes or carrots, so the first culling process takes place at harvest in the field. But then our packing shed, we basically have three systems. We have a stainless steel wash line that anything kind of round and firm with sponge rollers and brushes and top and bottom pressure wash. So anything firm that doesn't get damaged can run across the wash line that pretty much everybody's familiar with. Then we have stainless steel sinks that we do all our leafy greens in with the homemade spin dryer out of an old washing machine is what we use, the batch drying there. And then for our root washing, we still haven't gone to a barrel washer. We use, not saying that we won't, but our root washing is still done with high pressure water. We have a rack table, we have a rack, and we'll do a pre-soak. So if it's like you're pulling carrots out of the ground or radishes or beets or whatever, you do, whether it's the entire field doing a batch harvest or we're doing, a day's harvest of so many for this week's CSA. By the time you get it to the packing shed, some of that dirt's starting to dry a little bit. So we pre-soak it a little bit and then pressure wash it. When everything's working great, we're bunching in the field, pressure washing, and it's done. If there's issues, then we're bringing it in pieces and we're pressure washing, then bunching is the last thing. It kind of depends on, that again, that's the benefit and we're willing to do that, but that also comes at a cost. Because every time it's not just perfect where we can bunch in the field and wash and be done.
Yeah. So the stainless steel line you have, is that a AZ line, or what type of line is
No,
that?
it's from an Amish place.
Okay.
It's like Rainflow probably sells them, similar to something they might sell, I think. But
They're
it's
like $14,000 or something, $10,000.
a little bit less. So it's not the
Okay.
ATZ with the chain
Oh,
and the
okay.
water. It's not that. That's like
Okay.
that's maybe our next one, you know.
That's your next one.
This is just a stainless steel version of the old brushes, pressure washer with the sponge
Yes.
rollers and then a round sorting
Yes.
table. This is just a
Yes.
stainless steel version of that.
Okay. I know exactly what you're talking
Yep.
about. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's, yeah, that one of those conveyors with the stainless steel conveyor is what we would like to be at,
Yeah.
because that's just so much more efficient, but they're just so expensive. So
Yep. And everything from just not just we can wash leafy greens from what I understand. I got a couple friends that have them. So then roots, but you can also wash your harvest totes in it and everything. So
correct.
that's our
Yes.
next stuff.
Yeah.
That's on our want list.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. We actually have the spot in the wash and pack already reserved for it.
Nice. Yeah, nice.
When we built that, we're like, okay, well, this is gonna go here. So yeah. Yeah. Talk to us about the team. What kind of team do you have at the farm?
Okay, so we'll have 25-ish people at the farm in the peak time, dead of summer, like right before school starts in August. Up to
Okay.
25 in the winter time. We have 6 or so full-time year-round employees. Everything from one full-time production guy that helps me in the field, and then there's a full-time fulfillment or packing shed manager, fulfillment delivery person, full-time delivery driver, full-time person that basically runs all of us, and keeps all the trains on time, office person. And so I think there's 6 of us full-time this past winter. Then seasonally, we get a combination of students, so college students, and then
Okay.
we have some farmers market help that meet us at the market, and that could be anywhere from a student to just somebody looking for a half-day job on the weekend. You know, they already have a job, work somewhere else, and so those, there's another 6 or 8 farmers market people that that we seldom see at the farm, that just work, one afternoon at one of the markets kind of thing. And then H2A workers. So we've got 10 or 12 H2A workers that come staggered. So they come spring, summer, and fall, and they all kind of overlap in the peak of summer. But it's a couple of different families and groups that have been with us for 20 plus years.
Okay. So you have quite the array.
Well, it's a combination for sure.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
everything here, it's very diverse. How about that?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. What would you say your favorite tool on the farm is?
So maybe I have a new one, but I have the route we took. I grew up on 140 cultivating tractors, so that's what I grew up like in just traditional 3-point hitch in the back of tractors type of stuff. But we cultivated tobacco with the 140. I'm the way I think, it was always made sense to me to be doing as many things as you could at one time in the field. So at a pretty young age, we invested, or at my insistence, my dad and I bought an old Deutsch tractor that used to have a front 3-point hitch on in front, and we rebuilt it and put one back on the front because I'd always wanted to try to push and pull stuff. And that really worked for us. And so after that, I ordered they don't even make them anymore, I don't think, but a Valtra tractor.
Yes.
And because it was it's 100 horsepower, but it's pretty light. So it's like a strong but light tractor. Kind of opposite of what a lot of row crop tractors are, but it's got the front end 3-point hitch and PTO. And so that tractor is just absolutely worn out, being used all the time, because we do, when you're pushing your cultivator, you can see it. It doesn't have to be belly mount. You can push, 4, 6, 8 row stuff in front of you, or you can push a 2-row something to do a bed, so it's very universal. So that tractor, you put a rotor tiller, just the other day, rotor tiller on the front and the Mac air seeder in the back, and tilling and planting sweet corn at the same time. And so that's that setup, that pushing and pulling cultivators and tillage equipment and planters is really worked well for me. I've been happy with it. But I went to the Midwest Weed Control Field Day. That's not the
Yes.
exact name of it. Last year, I think it
The
was
one up in Ohio?
Yeah, I think last year was in Illinois, but it's been in Ohio. It moves around. But I think
It was, yes, you're right. It was in Illinois last year because I went to the one 2 years ago.
yeah.
Yes.
And so I went to that last year and realized that autonomous, electric, robotic type planters and cultivators are not that far off. I just assumed that it was, big row crop farms, something larger than us, but, we got 10, 15, 20 acres of vegetables, 10 acres of plastic, and then some intensive cropping ground. But so we got 30 acres that could be cultivated, planted and cultivated. I saw some machines there that made me realize that that's not that far away. And so I'm hesitant to invest anymore in the equipment that I have, I guess. I'm going to try to kind of ride it out for a few more years because I definitely, there's a machine up there that planted every seed, kind of like an air seeder, and then since it knew where it planted it, and it was all, robotic drive. I mean, it knew where they planted the seed, so it could go back and cultivate around that seed. You didn't need radar to see where the plants or distinguish between plants and the cash crop was. That machine knew where it planted the seed, so when it went back to cultivate later, it knew where to dodge. That's amazing. And so
is that GPS? Is it running off GPS or?
So I think it's GPS, but they were also using RTK. And so I think it's a combination, maybe GPS and RTK to get it down to be inches away rather than.
Because GPS can only be GPS is pretty darn good, actually.
Yeah, I think it's getting pretty accurate, but this thing, of course, they didn't have the crop up. They had golf tees sticking in the ground and it was dodging those. And so
gotcha.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But so anyway, that's telling me that I don't want to be back to this tractor setup that I have. I need another one. It's too, there's too many people trying to drive it at the same time. So, but after going up there, I'm hesitant to invest in, another $50,000-$75,000 piece of equipment that's diesel and requires an operator.
Yeah.
I can foresee not too far in the future, I could, get one of these little robots that looks like an igloo cooler out there that plants my entire field and cultivates it. Or the thing that I was just describing was bigger than that. It did like 6 rows and stuff. But anyway, so I guess I'm kind of waiting a little bit on that stuff. But I just took delivery of a Tillmore electric Super E tractor here the other day. And that's my it's not autonomous, but it's also, again, one person can do a whole lot of stuff on those tractors. It's basically the new version. Yeah, it's basically just a really new, super efficient version of an Alice G. You got all the tools you need in front of you. But this one's all electric. And our acreage might be kind of on the high side or maxing it out. But it's just a cultivating tractor. It can't do all the other stuff this other tractor does. But to me, it was kind of like we've grown enough that I needed to do something this year. And this allowed me to maybe a bridge, an electric tractor dedicated for where the biggest bottleneck was, to tide over until maybe some autonomous robotic type stuff in the future without having to buy a $75,000 another 100 horsepower with cultivators or 3-point hitch on the front and back. So this is my, I don't know if I'm trying to justify it or if that's the true logic.
No,
but that was
I definitely looked
bridge.
at one of those. Yeah, I looked at one of those, but I saw they weren't shipping till October, so you must know somebody.
Not at all, actually. I talked them in to let me use a prototype.
Gotcha.
I don't, I just was very fortunate, right place, right time, and persistent, I guess. That's what it boils down to. But so it's awesome. I mean, we've literally just run it, 10 hours so far. Just had it 2 days, and now it's been raining ever since.
Yeah.
But really like it a lot. And they're still they've had prototypes out for a few years, just trying to get feedback and improve it. And their hesitancy was, obviously they don't want to put something out that's not like the finished product, but they
Yes.
had this one that they feel like is pretty close to the finished product, so they're not too hesitant to let me borrow it.
Yeah, I still have a prototype of the two-wheel tractor they have,
Nice.
and it was actually something they had to come out and change some stuff out because it wouldn't the clutch would not disengage.
Okay, yeah,
And so that was actually a little bit dangerous. So they had to come out and work
absolutely.
on that. And I still have it sitting. We just don't use the two-wheel. We have a Super C, and so that's how I do all my cultivation. But I'd
Gotcha.
love to switch over to one of these Super E's
Yeah,
because I just think it'd be way superior. I mean, the Super C is just wearing out, and so
exactly. Yep.
it's just so
Same
hard to
thing.
cultivate. Yeah,
Well, we got a 140 in the barn that I haven't used for several years,
yeah,
and so it's the same thing. So we outgrew it, and it's worn out. It got to be,
yeah,
you have to turn the steering wheel pretty far to make any
yeah.
corrections and stuff. So yeah,
And I think you just don't realize until you actually get good steering just how bad the bad steering is and how much you're destroying.
exactly. That's
So,
exactly right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So anyway, so yeah, I'm tickled with this thing. It seems to be, first impression is great.
Mhm.
Obviously you can have a part of what they're wanting to find out is in the real world, what is the runtime of the batteries? But we ran it 6 hours straight pushing A blades and finger weeders the other day, and it
Mm.
didn't, and side dressing, and it was still going when it got dark. And so
Yeah.
so anyway, it's off to a good start as far as I can tell. But I came away from that field day though with those autonomous tractors. I was really surprised. I came away from there kind of paralyzed. It's like I need to
Mm.
do something now. Those things are going to be available in the not too distant future. So it's that I was kind of like, what do I do? I don't. But so this Super E, I think, is kind of my bridge, my segue. I hope.
Mhm.
But super
Yeah.
happy with it so far.
Cool. Yeah, I'm anxious to. I'll probably. I think they're having another field day this year, and I'm sure that will be there. So I'd love to kind of get in and get some ideas on looking at that because that does look like a really handy machine.
Yeah, so you mentioned, you
Yeah.
brought it up. I'm looking for where that field day is going to be again because again I'm now intrigued by the autonomous stuff. But the Organic Association of Kentucky, or OAK, is hosting, after attending that. I think they're going to try to put together like a Kentucky mini version of an
Okay. Yeah.
in-field cultivating weed control field day somewhere down here. And so once I have a date and location, I'll shoot that to you.
Awesome. Yeah, that'd be cool. All right. Well, I don't want to keep you. We've been going for almost an hour here. It's been fabulous. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your farm story and just kind of how your operation runs and all that. It's been fascinating. And yeah, I've seen you guys out there for a couple of years and glad we can finally connect.
Yeah, you too, Michael. Thanks for the interest, and appreciate what you do. I've learned so much from others, and so I don't know if I have anything to offer, but I certainly I'm glad to share our story because that's how we got to where we are. It's been doing it a long time, but we certainly learned from others. So
Yeah, no, John, I actually the whole animal rotation in the vegetables, that was something that's the reason I went to Polyface in 2000 I think it was 2012. I was there an intern. And just to try to see like how can we, because I realized that was, the big problem we had in our farm in upstate New York was we were just destroying the soils. I mean, we had a lot of acreage. We were running 40 acres, heavy cover crop, and getting away with it. But I really wanted to bring in the animals. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
wanted to hear how you guys did it, and it's very interesting to hear exactly how you guys make that work. So
Well,
that's some solid information.
I real quick, I'd like to advocate for it a little bit. Two things. One, that rotation, having that on-farm fertility program in place really lowered the big barrier of becoming organic. So when a lot of
Mm.
farms switch to organic, you worry about your weeds and you worry about your insects. But what I think determines a lot of organic long-term success is the fertility plan. Because you can't really just do input substitution and go from bringing in ammonium nitrate to bringing in just semi-loads of, poultry litter or something like that. It often, eventually often breaks the bank, kind of trying to just do that. So to me, kind of a livestock crop rotation lowers the hurdle for becoming like a long-term successful organic farm from the fertility point of view. But the more you can generate on farm, and the fewer pounds of stuff leaving the front gate, fewer pounds of produce that I'm leaving the front gate. So the value adding, but the on-farm animal rotation really reduces the bulk of inputs that you need to bring in on the farm. So to me, it's kind of a key. We were involved years ago, like 8 or 10 years ago, in an energy study. So if you think about it, Michael, the ultimate measure of efficiency is how many calories it takes of us farming, how many calories of inputs does it take to generate a calorie of food? And so, hunter-gatherers, the earth is whatever, historically, obviously there was plentiful, it took, whatever it took you to harvest or to hunt it down. But by, at some point, nature wants it to be like it takes a half a calorie to go harvest this food that's presented to me by nature, and I get a calorie from the apple or whatever. In ag, in order for 1% of the population to feed the rest of the population, and in order for us to have a lot of free time and a lot of comfort, some ag is taking up to 50 or even more calories to generate 1 calorie of food. And that's pretty, that can't go on forever, I guess. And so we were part of a study. There was a University of Kentucky and University of Georgia did a study a few years ago on different farming systems, and that looking at that ratio, calories in, calories out. And they looked at, I think we were on the large side in terms of like field scale, 10, 20, 50 40 acres type of stuff. But it was more looking at the livestock crop interaction and the soil building thing that we did. The other farm they looked at was very well run, very intensive, like 5 or 10 acre farm using walk behind tractors and field scale tractors, but a lot of inputs, a lot of organic inputs. But it was, high yield, but high input, very aggressive progressive organic farming. And then the third thing was high tunnel, man-powered, walk-behind tractor powered. So more very intensive, but all hand labor or walk-behind tractor. And out of all those three, we were all, first off, it's very depressing because we were all using way too many calories to generate 1 calorie of food. So we all have room for improvement. But out of that study, just the livestock crop interaction and the reduced inputs that we used on our farm for fertility, ours was the most efficient of the three, and it was significantly more efficient than the metrics out there for confinement animals or for row crop farming. Those metrics out there were pretty high calories input for 1 joule or 1 calorie of food produced. But it came down to, I think we were down to 7 to 1 maybe in our study, which is still just basically deflating if you think about it as a farmer. There's still such a long way to go. But relative to the industry standard and relative to the other farms, at least told me that we were like heading in the right direction. And you think about, you're doing an urban farm or you're doing fairly intensive stuff, but you're bringing in compost, which now some of that could be just leaf compost, which is fine. But a lot of the bigger ag operations, if they don't have a livestock component, they're still bringing in livestock manures or compost or bedding. So there's this, it's kind of like ultimately it's going to be joined together. If you have confined animals, you have to move the manure somewhere back out to the farm. But all that hauling makes it pretty inefficient, where if you actually put it in a system together, we're still hugely inefficient, but we're better than the average, I guess is what it boils down to.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
No, that's fascinating. Where could people find this study? Is that available?
Oh, wow. I will have to send you the link, Michael. It's,
Okay, yeah. I'd love to include that in the show notes.
I will. So let me get it. Let me find it. Actually, what I have is one grad student did a dissertation as a side part. I know I have access to
Okay.
that, but I need to get, what you really need is the full study. And so let me
Yeah.
get the link to that.
So, yeah, I talk to Elliot Coleman every once in a while. This latest time he was talking about, he's got a new book he just sent to his publisher called and I think he's talked about it. I don't think it's a secret at all. The farm fed fertility or something like that, where the farm generates all the fertility for the food.
Yeah.
And that's where he is right now with his farm. And obviously he's been going for forever to get there. But he keeps talking. He's like, yeah, these little half-acre farms that put on 6 inches of compost and call it organic. It's like to them, that's almost as bad as the conventional guys because of how unnatural it is.
Yes.
And so again, anyway, I'm all for all farms, all sizes, all types, but I think he has a point of that it's so unnatural. And so, but again, where you are with your farm, you have to have a significant amount of acres to make what you're doing happen too.
Absolutely.
So,
yep.
I mean, if you look at the market garden movement came out of, I think it was Paris, where they had, there was almost feet of manure in the streets from all the horses.
Right. Yeah.
And
yep.
we don't have that anymore. So again, this is a conversation that could be multiple hours, and I would love to get a lot of these different folks together in the same room and kind of talk it out and just kind of think about it. But it's a huge issue, and it's a big issue.
You're right, though. So in our scenario, we have a lot of acres that are just pasture. But what it is, you don't have to have the pasture acres. You just have to have a willingness to take part of your cropland and put it in pasture and only make a few $100s. So part of it is it's that willingness. Now, can we do that in an urban setting where you're farming a half acre? No, but you could do it on an acre or two. I mean, sheep are ruminants.
Yes.
I say ruminants. You need a ruminant because that's what's going to be able to gain weight on forage alone and then give you a sellable protein commodity.
Yes.
Like it's an income generator. You don't have to use ruminants just to rest your land, but that allows.
So we have 8 acres here and we're in urban. And so we could absolutely do sheep on our acreage. Unfortunately, we're in the city limits, so it's illegal.
Yeah. Okay. That's all.
But,
there you go. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Greg Gunthrup out in, I think he's in Illinois. Is that where Greg is?
Think so.
He does the sheep underneath all the solar arrays, which I think is fascinating and very cool.
Exactly.
And again, I'd love to talk to him deep about the economics. Because again, if you think about sheep versus mowers, and then now you have, I don't know. Yeah. So that would be really interesting. And I think he probably has laid it out in a Facebook post or two. He's usually pretty good about that.
So I did a back in the napkin math a few years ago before a presentation about this rotation. So the number, so this is just me and Google. So it could all be wrong. I'm saying that right up front. But me using a calculator and Google, like looking up arable land in the world and population of the world and all that kind of stuff. I took our yields off of this rotation. So basically, I have a cow, she has a calf, and then she has like the yearling that's getting ready to be finished for steak. And so I roughly have like 1 animal beef unit per 4 acres. And then you have the crop of potatoes. No, I use sweet potatoes 1 year, kale 1 year, and tomatoes 1 year. So 3 years of vegetables, and then the beef that produced it in that 5 years of rest and pasture. And I prorated that over the world. In this farming system, you could feed people 3 ounces of beef a day and twice the pound. This wasn't calories, this was pounds, but twice the pounds of produce that a person needs to eat in a day. Like this system, what encouraged me was this is not, while we're still inefficient, we still have a long ways to go, but this rotation and this crop livestock footprint, if our fertility in our land was comparable, if I extrapolated it over all the arable land in the world, I was able to feed people twice the food that they needed, plus 3 ounces of beef every day. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes. No, that's fascinating.
So all of that is a complete reach, right? Because all land isn't the same fertility, but that also tells me I'm not just completely way out of the ballpark. This is something to keep like working on and keep trying to perfect, I guess.
It's attainable. Yes.
It encouraged me to keep going. That's the best way to put
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
We have a long ways to go, but at least I felt like I was barking down the right path. So to
Yes.
speak.
Yes. Now, and it's interesting too, because I feel like at the government level, there's never enough research into organics. And so if we could start putting the amount of research that they put into conventional into organics, true organics and some of this long-term sustainability aspect, I think we could see some huge advantages.
Absolutely.
So that would make us even more efficient. And I think we're also starting to see population decline, let's say in China, in Japan, even in the US. I think we're getting close. I mean, our population keeps going, rate of renewal keeps going down. So I think the world population is going up still, but it's starting to get a little bit, it's not going up at I think the rate it once was.
Right.
So I think we are getting to a place where we but again, long topic. We could go on for hours, but hey, again, John, thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it. And good conversation.
Thank you, Michael. You too.
All right. Bye.
So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.